You know, we're about to dive into two of the shortest books in the Hebrew Bible to tackle one of the biggest, toughest questions humanity has ever faced. It's a question that just echoes through the centuries, right? It's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago, and it really gets to the very heart of what we believe about the world.
And this is it. This is the big one. The question at the absolute core of so much of our struggle and our doubt. When tragedy strikes, when it feels like injustice is winning, this is the question that just bubbles up and demands an answer. It's this universal cry for meaning in a world that, let's be honest, often feels completely chaotic.
And if you think this is just some ancient philosophical problem, think again. Look no further than Rabbi Harold Kushner. His son, Aaron, tragically died from progeria, a disease that causes incredibly rapid aging. I mean, this devastating experience forced the rabbi to confront this question head-on, which led to his famous book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. His personal story really frames our entire exploration today.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by really defining the problem. Then we'll explore two ancient case studies, one about pride and another about indifference. From there, we'll look at what it actually means to wrestle with God. And finally, we'll pull it all together into this powerful idea about justice. Okay, first up, let's give this problem its proper name. Philosophers and theologians have a very specific term for this struggle, this attempt to reconcile a good, all-powerful God with all the evil and suffering we see in the world.
And that term is theodicy. It's all about asking, how can a good and just God allow a world to exist where things just seem to be falling apart? This is precisely the theme that our two prophets, Obadiah and Habakkuk, are going to help us unpack.
So our first case study comes from the prophet Obadiah. And wow, does he deliver a powerful message against a nation that thought it was completely and totally untouchable. Obadiah's message is aimed squarely at the nation of Edom. Now, the Edomites, they lived in this amazing fortress of rock, way up high in the cliffs. They were geographically secure, and that security, well, it bred this really dangerous level of arrogance. They truly believed no one could ever bring them down. And listen to the powerful poetry the text uses to confront their pride. Though you soar like an eagle, and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down. I mean, what a vivid image of self-importance, right? And it's met with this crystal-clear message. That kind of pride is not okay, and there's only one being who really gets the last word.
And this gets to the core conflict, doesn't it? The Edomites, they trusted in their physical rock, their literal mountain fortress. The prophet's message is a call to trust in a spiritual rock, in Yahweh. It's this fantastic contrast between misplaced confidence in earthly things and what true security actually is.
But here's the thing. Edom's downfall wasn't just about pride. There was a deeper and honestly, a more chilling reason for their judgment, and it gets right back to the heart of our big question.
Edom's great sin was being a bystander. As their brother nation Israel was being plundered and destroyed, the Edomites just stood by. They watched, they gloated, and they did absolutely nothing. It's like they found this sick kind of joy in watching others suffer.
The 20th century theologian Abraham Joshua Heschel just captured this timeless truth perfectly. Obadiah's ancient message against Edom is this powerful warning against the spirit of not my problem. It's a reminder that indifference, in the face of suffering, is a profound evil all by itself.
Okay, so let's shift gears now and pivot to our second prophet, Habakkuk. If Obadiah shows us God's judgment on a nation's indifference, Habakkuk shows us one man's deeply personal struggle with God over that very same injustice.
Habakkuk is so different. He's not just a messenger, he's a debater. His name might even mean to embrace or to clasp, which paints this incredible picture of someone literally wrestling with a huge problem. His book is basically a model for how to bring your honest questions and even your accusations directly to God.
Just look at this incredible back and forth. Habakkuk starts by complaining about the injustice in his own country. God answers, saying, okay, I'm going to use the Babylonians to judge them. But for Habakkuk, that answer only makes things worse, so he fires back, how can you possibly use an even more wicked nation to deliver justice? It's this raw, unfiltered dialogue that shows us that questioning God, well, that's a totally valid path to faith.
So what do we do with all this? We've got Obadiah's focus on national accountability on one hand, and Habakkuk's personal wrestling match with God on the other. How do we bring these two ancient perspectives together to answer our big question?
Let's circle back to Obadiah for just a second.
he doesn't just judge Edom. He points to this universal principle that's at work in the cosmos. He introduces the idea that our actions have consequences, that there is an ultimate law of retribution.
And this quote just spells it out. Your deeds will boomerang. They come right back to you. It's the law of the harvest, right? What you sow, you will eventually reap. It suggests there's a moral arc to the universe, and sooner or later, our actions catch up with us.
The modern writer C.S. Lewis framed the same idea in terms of our destiny, and it's just, wow. He said our choices, all added up over a lifetime, reveal who we really are. And in the end, God either affirms our choice to follow Him, or He affirms our choice to follow ourselves. Our decisions determine our destiny. So this brings us to this really powerful two-part answer. From Obadiah, we get this assurance that nobody gets away with anything forever. Justice is real, and it is eventual. And from Habakkuk, we get permission to struggle. He shows us that when justice seems delayed, questioning, doubting, even arguing with God isn't a sign of weak faith, it's a sign of an engaged faith.
And that leaves us with this final thought. If we hold these two ideas in tension, that accountability is certain but the timing isn't, and that honest struggle is a vital part of belief, how does that equip us to live? How does it empower us to fight for justice right now, while still holding on to hope for a justice that is yet to come?